Hi everyone, this is Tim Barron from Rocket Matter. Thanks so much for joining us for the latest presentation in our Law Practice Management and Legal Productivity series. Our guest today is Diana Stepleton, the General Manager of Ruby Receptionist, a leading live virtual receptionist service making great first impressions for law firms nationwide. She oversees the sales department and overall day-to-day operations, making sure conditions are perfect for Ruby's top-notch service. Before joining Ruby, Diana spent nearly a decade on the equipment side of AT&T Lucent and co-owned a successful market research company for many years. Thanks for joining us. Diana, I'll turn the reins over to you.
Thank you so much. Hopefully everyone can still hear me well. Yes, so as I was just introduced, I'm General Manager of Ruby Receptionists. We're a small virtual receptionist company here in Portland, Oregon. We handle calls for around 2,000 clients across the US and Canada, and almost half of them at this point are solo and small firm attorneys. We've been doing this for over 9 years. We've been winning lots of awards, like the one last night that we're super excited about. But what I'm here to talk to you guys about today is virtual options. So mainly I'm going to talk virtual receptionist service, which is what we are, but I thought I'd start off by talking about what are the virtual options, a bunch of different things. First, I'll start with something that most people are familiar with, which is answering services. Typically, an answering service is used for evenings and weekends. They're not typically known for providing outstanding service. You know, you get the classic answering service, hold please kind of idea in your head when you think of an answering service. But they do serve a purpose, absolutely, and some answering services do answer 24 hours a day, and people use them for all sorts of different purposes. Big difference between answering service and virtual receptionist, and the reason I bring it up is it's kind of the thing that people are most familiar with enough that they can draw the equation between virtual receptionist and answering service. So the biggest difference is that an answering service sounds like a service, and a virtual receptionist sounds like they're sitting in your office with you if they're doing it right. An answering service typically will take messages. They can sometimes call you in case of emergencies, and sometimes they can even transfer calls through to you live, but it's not their typical way of operating. They do generally send you your messages right away, although sometimes they batch the messages and send them, you know, they might answer for you overnight and send you all your messages in the morning type thing. So that's the nuts and bolts on an answering service, which most of you I'm sure are familiar with, but again, I just wanted to draw the analogy to the differences there between the virtual receptionist service and answering service. Next, there's also virtual assistants. And you know, there's virtual paralegals, there's virtual all sorts of things. But virtual assistants tend to perform administrative duties, such as preparing drafts for your court documents, pleadings, or transcribing witness statements, or things that they can do off-site that don't require an immediate handling of something. So you can send them off a document, they handle it, they send it back to you when they're finished with it. They typically don't answer incoming calls. Some virtual assistants do. And most virtual assistants I talk to who answer calls don't feel they do a great job of it. I mean, these are the virtual assistants themselves telling me this. The problem is that if you're one person and you're answering for multiple clients, there's a risk that multiple clients might get a call at the same time, or there's a risk that you're out of the office running an errand for someone when the calls come in. So it's just not super conducive to being able to answer calls well. They do a wonderful job at all the rest of the stuff they do, but it's really not their focus to answer calls. Then, just because it's also kind of in this same genre, I'm going to talk about virtual offices for just a minute. Virtual offices are physical buildings. They are locations where they would provide you an address, they might provide you an office space, they might provide you access to conference rooms. They often will answer your phones for you as well. And they'll provide you a phone number, an address, again, a place to, you know, to live, a place to operate your business out of, and potentially, or potentially meeting space. Some people, you know, work out of their homes and then use a virtual office just because they need conference room space. But again, virtual office is different than virtual receptionist because it's a physical location. And then we finally get to what we do here for a living, virtual receptionist services. Now, if you Google virtual receptionist services, you'll find a whole bunch of things, some of which will be services like ours, and some of which will be an automated system. So if you think of an automated system where you call up and something answers and it says press 1 for this and press 2 for that, and you can route your call appropriately as you like, that's that is sometimes referred to as a virtual receptionist service. Not what I think of, but I think of that as an automated attendant. But it is often called virtual receptionist service. And again, if you Googled virtual receptionist service, you get some live services and you get some automated things. But what I'm really here to talk about today is live virtual receptionist service. So live people answering your phones from a remote location. So I'll go to the next slide. What a virtual receptionist can do. So first of all, I want to explain that the term virtual also is one of those things that means different things to different people. In our case, and in most cases for virtual receptionist services, the receptionists are virtual to you. They are not in your office with you, but they are in an office together. All of our receptionists are in an office here in Portland, Oregon. They aren't working from their home in their jammies with babies crying and dogs barking in the background. So it is a professional sounding service. It's just that they're not sitting in the office with you. So what a virtual receptionist can do. First, we can answer with your custom greeting. So again, I was talking about answering services earlier. An answering service would typically answer with answering service and handle whatever it is you want, but it's clear that it's an answering service. Virtual receptionist will answer with your custom greeting. Thank you for calling the Wilson Law Firm. This is Diana. How may I help you? Really sounding like we're sitting there with you, giving a great first impression. We can transfer calls to you wherever you are and wherever you like. We can transfer calls to you on your cell phone, to your home phone, to your desk, if you have an office. It can be by different times of day. You can say, I want to take my calls in the morning, but in the afternoons, I want you to take messages. It's very customizable in that way. And your caller has no idea where you are when the call is transferred to you. So they call the published number they're used to calling for you. A virtual receptionist would answer the phone, and we would transfer it to you. If we transfer it to your home, the caller doesn't know your home number at that point. It's all very not transparent to them. Then we can let you know who's on the call, who's on the line before transferring. So typically when we transfer calls through to people, we offer the call. So think of sitting in an office with an in-house receptionist, and the receptionist would call you and say, hi Bill, this is Diana, I have so-and-so on the line. Would you like to speak with them? You can do any number of things at that point, just like you could with an in-house receptionist. You could say, sure, I'd love to, and the receptionist would transfer through, and you would be speaking to your caller. Or you could ask for more information. You go, Bill, I'm not expecting a call from a Bill. Could you go back and ask him more information, or ask him who referred him, or ask him whatever it is you'd like to know? Or maybe you're just about to step into a meeting and you want to say, hey, could you go back and tell him that I can call him back in an hour? You could say, gosh, I know that guy thinks he wants to talk to me, but really he needs to talk to Sally. Could you see if Sally's available, and send the call to Sally instead? Or you could just tell the receptionist to go back and take a message. So it's just as flexible as with an in-house receptionist. And I think this is one of the key things that people are surprised about when they think of a virtual receptionist. They think we're going to either just take a message or take the call and transfer it through, but more of what we call a blind transfer, which is we just kind of throw it at you, and if you get it, you get it, and if you don't, your voicemail does. But it's very, very flexible in terms of the transferring. Next is, again, along the lines of this flexibility, we can customize how the calls are handled for different people. So say you're in an office, there's 3 people in your firm. The 3 of you don't have to agree on how you would want your calls handled. Someone might say, gosh, I really want my call screened. I want to know who it is before I take the call. Someone else might say, gosh, I really don't care who's on the phone. I'm going to want to talk to him. So just send it on through to me, and don't take any extra time to do the screening. Some people want us to take manual messages. The receptionist may take a message and takes down whatever the information is. Some people prefer voicemail messages. Some people want to allow the caller to pick. So the receptionist would say, so-and-so is not available. May I take a message, or would you prefer to leave a voicemail? Again, this is by person in your firm. This can be decided. Some people want us to put all types of calls through, and some people only want us to put through certain types. So maybe potential new client calls are put through, but everybody else is asked to go to voicemail or have a message taken. And again, this can all be done by time of day. You could have different schedules for different days. You could say, I take calls on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and not on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Pretty much anything you can imagine in terms of customizing how we handle your call, we can do that. We can answer frequently asked questions about your firm. So think of the things that when callers call, they expect a receptionist in a law firm to know. They expect to know, how do I find your office? Where do I park? Do you offer free consultations? Do you have a stated hourly rate? A relatively small list, frankly, of things we find that everyone just expects the receptionist to know when they're calling a law firm. We would love to have that information, and the virtual receptionist can answer those questions for the caller. It's nice that the caller can just get their information really quickly that way, and it also saves you time because we're not interrupting you to ask you to take this call just to tell someone, that there's a parking lot across the street type thing. Then this is something that some virtual receptionist services have and not all. So if you like this idea, you're going to definitely want to ask about it if you're talking to a virtual receptionist service. And this is being able to follow different instructions based on whereabouts. So again, think of an in-house receptionist, and anything you would tap that receptionist on the shoulder and say as you're walking out the door. So I'm going to go work from home this afternoon. Try me there. Or I'll be in court until 3. And just take messages until 3 o'clock. Or I'm going to go watch my daughter's soccer game. Only call me if it's urgent. Anything that you would want the receptionist to know so that she can handle the calls appropriately. And in our case, you can let us know via phone, via email, via internet. We have an iPhone app. A lot of companies make it really easy for you to get this information to the receptionist. And then the receptionist not only handles your call appropriately, but they can inform your callers and set good expectations for them. So if you said you're in court until 3, the receptionist can say, oh, he's in court until 3, may I take a message? They find that callers are a lot happier, or we have found that callers are a lot happier when they have a reasonable expectation of when they're going to get a call back. And we hear a lot actually from our clients that before they had us, they would get 17 messages from the same person calling while they're in court all day. And when a receptionist can answer and say, oh, he's in court all day, he'll be able to call you tomorrow, it's the person only calls once, and they're not so stressed out about it when they do finally reach them.
Hey, Diana, we actually have a few questions. So before you move on, the first is, how does one handle returning calls from home offices, etc., without revealing called ID with your service?
Right. There's a couple different ways you can do that. If you dial *67 from your home phone, it will block the caller ID, so the caller won't see the number you're calling from. Another thing I know some of our clients do is if you use a Google Voice number, there's if your published number is a Google Voice number and that's the number you're going to want to display on the caller ID, they have a way that there's a code you can enter so that when you're dialing out from a different number or from a regular landline, it can identify as your Google Voice number. Okay, excellent. I think *67 is probably your best bet.
Yeah, yeah, I've used that more than once. And that is there a charge for phone time minutes on calls transferred from your service?
For our service, particularly for Ruby Receptionists, no. We bill for receptionist minutes, just the minutes the receptionists are actually involved in your call, and we do that in 30-second increments. We do not charge for the time once we have transferred a call through to you. I know for sure that a number of services do. The rate per minute of what they call talk time when you're talking to your caller is typically significantly lower than the receptionist time, but they still do charge for it. So that's another thing that you want to check if you're calling around to different services of how much they charge for the talk time. Because that can end up adding up quite a bit. If someone's transferred through to you and you talk for an hour, it can add up. Sure, sure. And what happens to calls outside of the normal answering hours? Couple different options. Some services answer 24 hours a day, so in some cases there are no outside of hours. We answer from 5 a.m. to 6 p.m. Pacific, so 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday. So kind of business hours coast to coast. And outside of those hours, we have a couple options. One is that we can forward your calls back to wherever you want them forwarded. So we can forward them back to your office to be answered by your answering machine that you have at night. We can forward them to your cell phone. We can forward them wherever you'd like. In some cases, we actually have clients. For example, we have an elevator service company that uses us because they really want to provide this super nice receptionist service. How friendly our receptionists are. But clearly, if you push that button in the elevator after hours because you're stuck in it, you need someone live to answer, and you don't really care how cranky they are at midnight. So they use us during the day, and we forward their phones to a 24-hour service at night so that they can at least have coverage. They tried the 24-hour service all the time. They didn't like the quality of the service. They couldn't find quality of our service 24 hours, so they went with us during the day, and and a 24-hour service at night. We have a number of clients where we forward to another service at night. But the most common thing we do is we set up voicemail for our clients here for after hours. And that can be after our hours or after their hours. So if you're on the East Coast and we could answer your phones until 9 o'clock, we don't have to. We could stop answering them at 6 if you want, or 5, or whenever you like. Any calls that come in after hours would go to a voicemail. That can be a single voicemail box, or it can be a press 1 for this person, press 2 for this person kind of voicemail box. There can be options on that outgoing greeting that say, if you want, and some people love this, some people hate it, it can be on the outgoing greeting, it can say press, let's say 7 if this is urgent, and if they press 7, then that could be immediately transferred to your cell phone, for example. And any messages that are left, either in voicemail during the day or at night, are immediately emailed to our clients with a little sound file attached. So it comes right away, and you can get a text notification as well if you want, if that would help you.
Excellent.
And the other thing is, for us, there's no charge for calls that come in after hours, because we only bill for receptionist minutes. If there's no receptionist handling your call, there's no charge for the call.
Fantastic. You know, we have quite a few questions rolling in, and I just want to let folks know that if we don't get to them, I'll forward all of your questions to Diana afterwards.
And I will answer them all.
And she can get back in touch with you. But before moving on, Diana, there's just one more question that I had also, but that someone also submitted. How long does it take for your staff to become knowledgeable about a client's particular requirements?
Well, that is kind of the beauty of our service. We have very sophisticated software that we designed ourselves. We spent a year designing. We spent another 6 months having someone make for us, and it went live a year ago, May, so a year and a half ago, I guess. And much better than our previous system. All of the bottom line is that the staff is not incredibly familiar with any of our clients. Now, because of the nature of they do this every day, they become familiar with some of them, but it's not by design. The intent is that the software provides all of the information they need to sound like they're sitting in that client's office. So we provide a toll-free number that our clients forward their published number to. When a call comes in, our system recognizes that toll-free number. It pops the screen for the receptionist. It has a line that says the greeting that they're supposed to say, you know, whether it's good morning, good afternoon, this is so-and-so, how may I help you, whatever the greeting is. There's a list of all of the employees. So if someone says, can I talk to Mike, they can quickly say, oh, which Mike would you like? Because they might see 2 mics on the list, or they can say, sure, let me see if Mike's available. There's a list of the types of calls they might get. So some people don't ask for someone by name. They call up and say, I have a question about my bill, or I'm a potential new client, or I'm having a problem, I need some help, or whatever the situation is. So there's both a list of types of calls, there's a list of employees, and then there's a list of the frequently asked questions. And then with whichever it is, so say they ask for Mike and the person clicks on Mike, they'll immediately see all the information about Mike. So that Mike normally takes calls on his cell phone, but right now he's in a meeting until 2. And so the receptionist could just say, gosh, he's in a meeting until 2, may I take a message? They don't have to memorize anything. It's all right there in front of them.
Thanks, Diana. I'll let you continue.
Okay, awesome. Let's see. So I covered that. So the next one more page of these, what a virtual receptionist service can do. Prioritize calls based on the type of call. So again, I was just going through different types of calls you might get. And that could be, you know, someone calling and asking about their bill, but it could also be potential new client calls are a type of call. Calls from the courts are a type of call. So a lot of our clients have real specific instructions that say, if calls come from the courts or judges, please put them through immediately. Please try all the numbers you have for me until you find me. And if you don't find me, then try someone else in my office. Like, don't let that person off the phone until you find somebody live. Whereas if a new client calls in, or a potential new client calls in, then, you know, try to find me. If you can't find me, then please complete this intake form. Where the instructions might be for an existing client, you know, try me at my desk, but if I don't answer, then put them into voicemail. And some of our clients even say, you know, if it's an existing client, just take a message. If I had something interesting to tell them, I would have called them. You know, unless they call and say, hey, I'm returning his call, then go ahead and take a message or put them into voicemail. So can prioritize based on the different types of calls. And I touched on this briefly, that we can perform a short intake for new clients. And I say short, we can actually perform any length of intake people want. Again, back to this idea that we here at Ruby bill based on receptionist minutes. I think it's kind of a balancing act. We want to ask enough questions that the caller feels like they engaged with your firm and get helpful information for you to decide to prioritize who you're going to call back and when. But we don't want to necessarily ask 45 questions for you at our per minute rate, because that doesn't necessarily feel fair. That said, we have clients who have us ask 25 to 40 questions, and we happily do it for them. We just feel a little bit guilty about it. And this is actually one of our things that I think our attorney clients like the best, is this ability to do an intake. And it isn't even necessarily, I don't think, for the information we gather. It's really for the engagement with the caller. That to be able to chat with the caller for a couple of minutes and find out what's going on is just hugely valuable in terms of them not hanging up the phone and just calling the next attorney on their list. Touched on this a little bit before. We can take messages or send callers to voicemail. It can be your choice. Some of our clients say, don't ever, ever, ever let anybody leave me a voicemail. Like, don't even make me a voicemail box. Just take messages. I hate listening to voicemails. Some people feel the other way, and most of our clients just say, give the caller the option. So the receptionist just says, may I take a message, or would you prefer to leave a voicemail? There are benefits on both sides. Again, this is a little particular to Ruby, but because we only bill for the time a receptionist is involved in the call, if someone rambles on your voicemail for 5 minutes, we're not billing for that time. So that's a benefit of having them use voicemail. The flip side is if there's particular things you want to gather from a caller, you want their name, their number, their email address, who referred them, anything else that you might want, you can say that on the outgoing greeting of your voicemail, please leave me your name, number, blah, 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 but they aren't necessarily going to do it. You have a much higher chance of them doing that if the receptionist is saying, may I get your name, may I get your number, may I ask who referred you, they're much more likely to remember to answer the questions. Let's see. Immediately relay messages to you via email or text. Again, back to this idea about how a lot of answering services work. You don't necessarily get your messages immediately. I've heard some fun stories when new clients sign up and then they call me a couple days later and they say, I just can't believe how this works. I was sitting at my desk in a meeting and a call came through and I didn't answer it because I was in a meeting, and you guys took a message, and in the 30 seconds that I could explain to my client I was sitting with that I just hired this new service, the text appeared on my phone with the message, and they're just thrilled with the immediacy of it. So yeah, and we can do it via email and or text. Whichever people prefer. This is also something, returning calls on people's behalf, that is a big deal, and I hear a lot about from our attorney clients that they really like this. So the idea is that we could make outgoing calls on your behalf, and back to that question from that caller ID person, or the person who asked about the caller ID, we can set our system to call out and identify as your number. So we can call, and it really looks like we're calling from your office, to confirm appointments, to relay information, to gather information. The main stories I hear on this is, first of all, obviously, confirming appointments is a big time saver, and having people really show up, and reminding them what they need to bring to the meeting and this type of thing. It just makes the meetings more productive. But then I hear a lot about being able to turn wasted hours into useful billable ones. So the classic example is, I do this a lot, of someone sitting in court, and we email, so if someone calls for them, we email a message that says, did you get that form that you needed? And the attorney can't pick up the phone and call that person back and let them know that, yes, they got it. But they can email us back on their BlackBerry and say, call that guy and say, yes, I got it, or say, no, I didn't get it, and I really need it by noon today, or whatever the situation is. And it keeps the process rolling along when it wouldn't necessarily otherwise when you're stuck in court. And lastly, on this topic, the idea that we can call and gather information or relay a tidbit of information. Hear a lot about people, particularly solos, saying, gosh, if I call this guy and I just want to ask him one quick question, or I just want to tell him one quick thing, I'm going to get sucked into a 30-minute conversation that I really don't have time to have, really don't want to have. And that they can email us and say, hey, would you call this guy and tell him such and such, or ask him such and such? And we would make that call. It might take a minute. We'll email back and say, I talked to him, here's what he said, and the situation's done. And you're not sucked into anything. And then lastly, most services provide this, a detailed or real-time real-time call report. So it's a report that you can find, in our case, you can find on our website. You can also find on our iPhone app. And different companies provide it differently, but it's almost always available via the internet somehow. that would show that for each call there would be a line that would show the date and time, the caller ID information for the person who called, where we transferred the call if we transferred it somewhere. In our case, we include the name of the receptionist who was involved, the time the receptionist spent on the phone, the time you spent on the phone. Again, we don't bill for that, but since our timing is all done by our phone system and it times that anyway, and we know attorneys like to keep track of their time, it can be quite handy to have that information on the report. So we put it on there. And then any information that was gathered during the call as well. So if we're asking them questions during the call, all that information is available in a real-time report. So, you know, if we send you a message and you lose it, or a lot of our clients find that they even will remember they had a call with somebody, but they actually spoke with the person live, but they can't remember what the details were. And you know, I know that guy called, but I think that guy called yesterday. I'm not positive he called yesterday, and you can look back on your report and verify if he did. The other thing is we've heard some awesome stories of people using our call report for good things. There was a client, an attorney client of ours named Clark, who had gotten a bar complaint because someone said that he had, this potential client had said, or I'm not sure if it was a potential client or existing client, but had said he'd called 15 times and that Clark had never called him back. And Clark just went to our website and pulled up his call log and saw that no, the number that guy said he was calling from had actually, I think he'd called twice and once left a message. And Clark took that report into the bar and said, look at this, and the bar said, you're right, and dropped it. And I've heard that story a number of times from different people. I hear it from practice management advisors as well. They often strongly suggest that people use a virtual receptionist service to maintain connection with their, not just connection, but to look responsive, to be responsive, and to be setting reasonable expectations with their callers. And then the report helps as well. So, are there questions at this point, or should I go on to my next section?
You know what, Diana, there are a few more questions. I tell you, I must say this is a very informed and engaged audience. But yeah, excellent. But before we do that, I'm going to quickly get you a word, just a very brief word, so we can get back to this, from our sponsor, which just happens to be Rocket Matter. For those of you who know us from our educational materials, whether webinars, podcasts, or our blog at thelegalproductivity.com, we also make a blazingly fast cloud-based legal billing and law practice management tool to keep lawyers organized and productive with their cases and their clients. We integrate with Dropbox, Evernote, Chrometa, and Google Calendar and other applications so that the web tools that you know and love are at your fingertips. Check us out at rocketmatter.com and check out our legal productivity blog at legalproductivity.com. And Diana, let me send you a few of these questions. One of the questions that we've gotten from a few folks is that, do you offer this services in Spanish? Do you have folks that answer calls in Spanish?
We do not, but there are virtual reception services who do, yes. Ruby Receptionist is not at this point. We are only English speaking.
Okay. And
but there are definitely bilingual virtual reception services.
Okay. Does your service interface with virtual PBX services like RingCentral?
Yes, absolutely. Lots of our clients use RingCentral. Yep. Yeah, and to use and I'll get into it a little bit later of what you need to be able to use a virtual reception service, but absolutely, yes.
And can you transfer calls to international numbers?
We can transfer calls to international landlines, like European landlines. Our long distance rates to transfer to an international cell phone is like what they would charge to make international calls 40 years ago. It's kind of unbelievable. So we don't transfer to international cell phones, but we do to landlines. And what a lot of our clients do if they're going overseas is they'll set up a Skype number, or they'll set up some other VoIP type number where we get a US or a North American number, a number in the North American dial plan that we can call, but it will ring for them elsewhere.
And I'll offer just one more question before you continue. Do you interface with client calendars to set up appointments or callbacks?
We don't at this point. We did when we first started. And what we found is we didn't do a fabulous job of it, and we didn't know for sure if it was because it's hard to keep someone else's calendar or because we just weren't good at that. But we decided that as a company, we would only do things that we were really, really good at and could wow people with, and that wasn't one of them. What I will say, I know one piece of it that was particularly challenging is that to keep somebody else's calendar, you really have to know, let's put it this way, it's very challenging to keep somebody else's calendar. For example, if you have a 1 o'clock appointment on your calendar and it's from 1 to 2, and someone calls up and says they want to see you at 2 o'clock, if I looked at your calendar, I'd say, oh, look, nothing after 2 o'clock, I'm sure I can go ahead and book that. I don't have any idea how long of an appointment to book this person. It's not necessarily the case that everyone gets the same length of time for an appointment. Second of all, you might know that that guy coming at 1 o'clock is chronically late. He's never going to show up at 1 o'clock. He's going to show up at 1:15, and you probably won't be done with him until 2:30. So now I've booked somebody in a spot that really wasn't available, even though it looked available. And what I also don't know is that every day at 3 o'clock you pick your kids up from school. So not something you put on your calendar, but something you do every day. And I wouldn't know that. So those types of things end up making it really challenging to keep somebody else's calendar. At this point, we don't. We are actually internally working on trying to figure out a way that we can overcome all of those things and do it well. So we hope to introduce that at some point in the future. Again, that said, there are virtual receptionist companies absolutely who will do this for you. I just can't guarantee they can do it well because it's hard. It's nothing against them. It's just challenging.
Okay, a final question. I don't want to interrupt you for too long, but how do you handle clients that discuss their case regardless of the receptionist's attempts to transfer the call?
Our receptionists are very well trained in what they call guiding the call to a conclusion. It is in our training, particularly here at Ruby, to be friendly and be helpful and engaging. And if you say, may I ask what it's regarding, and the caller says, well, gosh, it started when I was 5, and they launch into this long story, the receptionist is trained to say, oh, wow, gosh, that does sound just horrible, and you poor thing, and let me see if I can get the attorney on the phone for you. The training is that they should engage a bit, but not spend 5 minutes on the phone with this person or 10 minutes on the phone with them. So they should engage a bit and then guide them to let me get you to someone who can help you, or let me take a message so the attorney can call you back, or those types of phrases, and they practice it a lot, and they're good at it.
Thanks, Diana. It's all yours.
Okay, awesome. So why a live virtual receptionist? I just have to include this slide because I love this picture. This is actually in our office. That's Whitney, one of our receptionists. And really here at Ruby, the idea is that someone who cares about your practice will be answering every business day call. And I believe that that's very true for a lot of other virtual receptionist services out there. It's my one little Ruby plug that I will make. But I do think that virtual receptionists take their job really seriously, and they know that they're making a difference in the days of their callers and their clients. This is what they do for a living. They really want to make a difference on every call, and they care about the outcome of the call and how your practice is doing. But there's really kind of 5 reasons we have. They're on our website of why. Excuse me, why you would want to use a virtual receptionist. Each of these coming slides has a quote from our client. I'm not going to read them, but you're welcome to. So the main thing, I think, is to impress your callers. So think of the impression it makes when you're in the middle of something, your head's down, you're working on something, the phone rings, and you hurriedly answer with hello or law office, rather than a cheery, thank you for calling, Wilson Law Firm, this is Diana. Really, we're able to get the conversation off on a good start, and it's not necessarily something that is top of mind for everybody who's answering the phone within your office. Having someone whose sole focus is to answer your calls and make an enormous difference can make an enormous difference on the impression that is made for your callers, and it's really noticeable. Some of my favorite quotes from our clients are, we had a guy who'd had his firm, I think he emailed in, he said he'd had his firm for 20 years or 19 years, and he said, in my 19 or 20 years of running this law firm, I have never had anybody compliment me on my receptionist or how my calls were handled. And he had hired us maybe 6 months earlier, and he said, in the 6 months that I've been using you, it's happened 4 times. And if you think of how impressive a receptionist has to be, how nice and friendly and cheery a receptionist has to be for the caller to comment once they get transferred through about how nice that person was, it really makes an impression. Another story I was going to tell you was about an attorney who had called in one day when I was at lunch and was interested in our service. And when I called him back after lunch, I got him on his cell phone walking his dog in Manhattan. So there's sirens, and there's horns, and there's just incredible amounts of noise in the background. And he said, "Do you see why I need you? What kind of impression am I making on people?" But he said, "But when the phone rings, I feel compelled to answer it, because what if it's a potential client and I missed it, you know?" So being able to have a professional voice on the end of the phone every time it rings makes a big difference. The other thing is that a lot of, particularly with solos or people starting out, you don't necessarily have a brick and mortar office. And so calls are going to various people's cell phones, or they're handled in all sorts of different ways. But the ability to have a centralized answering and have the receptionist be able to distribute the calls where they should go and really sound like an office can make a difference in the impression that people have of your firm. Let's see. We'll go to the next one. Peace of mind is another big reason why people hire us. There's always someone manning the store, if you will. You can be doing what you need to do, and we will be taking care of your calls. When you use a virtual receptionist service, you can rest assured that receptionists will never be sick or late to work or on vacation. And in our case, for example, we work 13 hours a day, which most receptionists don't want to do. In some cases, people work 24 hours a day, which obviously no sane receptionist would want to do. So there's always a friendly voice answering your calls. And sometimes, because of the frequently asked questions or the answers to the frequently asked questions that we have for you, sometimes the calls can even just be completely handled. You can be off doing what you need to be doing, and we can answer the call and really answer it, handle it. And the caller is pleased and can move on and doesn't need to wait for you to even call them back. So you can be mobile. This is also one of my favorite quotes from a client of ours. It's created a different type of law practice. Instead of worrying about coming into the office, sitting by the phone, and making sure I don't miss a call, I take road trips and vacations with a laptop, an iPhone, and a few files. It's a mobile practice, and I love it. So the idea is just that you really can work wherever you are, and we can make sure that you get the calls sent to you. Now, some people say, well, couldn't I just do that with an iPhone? Couldn't I just publish my iPhone number and then, of course, I'm mobile because I can take that wherever I want. But the difference is, yes, you can to some degree. The difference is that by having a receptionist answer and offer you the call, you have the ability to decide if the environment you're in is suitable for that particular caller. So it might be okay to take a call from your favorite client in a noisy restaurant, but do you really want to make that impression on a potential new client? And isn't it nicer to ask the receptionist if she can hear you now rather than ask the potential client? Sometimes it's better to let the receptionist take a message for you and call back when you have more bars on your phone, as it were. So there's a couple different ways that you can interpret this. Obviously, a virtual receptionist for a solo or small firm is definitely cheaper than having a full-time person sit there all day to answer the maybe 5 to 25 calls that might come in during the day. At Ruby, for example, our average client spends $350 a month with us. Our smallest plan is $229 a month, and that's enough to answer about 5 or so calls per day. There are other services that are even less expensive than us. Our claim to fame is not our cheap price, but I just wanted to give you that as a ballpark of kind of what people pay typically. Now I'm just thinking, I wonder if I should tell you what our claim to fame is, but no, this is not a sales pitch. So some of you may have staff, and I often hear the scenario of, I have a paralegal, and my paralegal answers my phones, and typically those people are calling us saying, my paralegal answers my phones, and A, they don't do a great job of it, and B, they don't like to do it. And then I often hear feedback after they've hired us to say, gosh, that my paralegal's productivity has gone up dramatically, their job satisfaction has gone up dramatically. It's just a good thing all the way around not to make someone do something that is really not technically part of their job. I've read studies that say that it can take as much as 40 minutes to refocus once you've been interrupted by a phone call. I'm not really sure that I buy that. I don't know how deep you have to be in a project for it to take you 40 minutes to get back into it, but certainly 5 to 15 minutes it happens to me all the time. If I'm in a spreadsheet or working on a document and my phone rings, absolutely it takes me 5 to 10 or 15 minutes to get back into it. And if that's your time or one of your staffers' time, isn't necessarily the best use of the time, depending on how much the phone rings. This is also one of my favorite quotes. So when someone's calling around to find an attorney and they get your voicemail, they don't know if you've gone for an hour or you've gone to the Bahamas for a week. But if you have a live, friendly person answer your phone, engage with them, let them know when they can expect a return call, they are much less likely to just call the next attorney on their list or keep Googling to find more. I want to tell you the story about this client, Andrew, who wrote this quote for us. He's in Arizona, he's an IP attorney in Arizona, and I went to the Arizona Bar Conference, and I sent an email out to all of our attorney clients in that area to say, hey, I'm going to be here, would love to buy you guys dinner, because we're virtual, we don't get to meet our clients very often, so it's super fun when we get to meet them in real life. So he and a couple others responded and said they'd love to have dinner with me. And so the others actually were attending the conference. Andrew was not, but he was just so excited about the chance to meet a real Ruby, as he said, that he drove an hour to come to dinner with us anyway. And he brought with him, this is not his chart that I'm showing there, but he did bring an Excel chart with him that showed clients per month, new clients per month, before he hired Ruby, and new clients per month after he hired Ruby, and it was this crazy upward trajectory that it went on after he hired us. And he completely attributed this to us. And I said, I'm thinking there's got to be something else going on in your practice that made this difference. He said, I don't think so. It's really the only thing I changed. And he said, the problem is that I was constantly in very long meetings or working on things and crabby when I answered the phone if I did answer it. And he said, now you guys answer, and I get new clients all the time. So it was very fun. Phone capabilities. So I get a lot of calls with people asking me for suggestions for lawyers who are just starting out, and they want to know, what pitfalls to avoid in terms of phones. Most importantly, I suggest publishing a number that you can keep, that is yours to keep and you won't have to change. So you print it on your cards, you put it on your website, you put it in listings. It's not your cell phone, which you think, well, that is my number and I can keep it, but at some point down the road, you're going to regret that the world is calling your cell phone and you can't get away from it. Now you have partners and you want a centralized phone number, and it's your cell phone number. I have this conversation all the time of people who regret having made that decision. Another way to get a number is, or another way people often end up getting a number, I should say, is that they move into one of those virtual office spaces I spoke about in the beginning, and they will give you a phone number. If you go that route, you want to make sure that you ask up front, is this number mine to keep? If I move out of this office, may I keep this phone number? Sometimes they'll say, sure, there's a charge. Sometimes they'll say, sure, you can just have it. And sometimes they'll just say, no. And often people don't find that out until later. They've been using a virtual office space for a few years. They go to move. They want to take their published number with them. All their clients already have it. And the space says, no, it just doesn't work that way. So back to the Ring Central question, doing something like getting a Google Voice number or getting a Ring Central number is a good option, so that that number is yours and it can follow you around wherever you want to. Another good option, well, obviously if you're getting a physical office, you get a landline installed or a VoIP line installed, that's yours to keep. Another good option if you aren't opening a brick and mortar office is what's called a remote call forward line or a market expansion line. It's different terms for the same thing. You get them from a landline company like Verizon or CenturyLink or any landline company. Cable companies have them. Time Warner has them. It's a phone line that lives at the phone company. It does not get physically installed anywhere, so there's no jack. You can't plug a phone into it. You can't dial out on it. But it lives at the phone company, and they just forward it wherever you want it forwarded. And you can forward it to your cell phone, you could forward it to an office, you could forward it to that number that the virtual office space gave you, you could forward it to a virtual receptionist service, forward it anywhere you like. And at some point in the future, if you do get a physical office, that landline company would be happy to come out and physically install it for you and make it a real landline. But it's a real handy way to do it, and it's typically around $25, $30 a month, and then you have that security of knowing that number is yours to keep. Then the other thing that if you're going to use a virtual receptionist service and you want calls transferred back to you, then you need a number that we can call other than any number that you might have forwarded to us. So again, people typically take their published number and they forward it to us. And then if we're going to transfer calls back, we can call you back on your cell phone, your home phone, your line 2, whatever you want, other than that number that you forwarded to us, because then it just goes in a circle. That would not work. And the other question I get frequently when I'm talking on this topic is, if you take your published number and you forward it to a virtual receptionist company, can you still use it to make outgoing calls? And yes, you can. And you can be on it, and if someone calls you, that call will still forward through to the virtual receptionist company. So you're not giving up the use of your landline. 4 different ways that people use a virtual receptionist service. There's really more than 4, but I tried to narrow it down. Number 1 is all the time. So people just take their published number and they forward it to us and they never look back. We are their receptionist. We talked briefly about the after hours options that we have. If you forward it to a 24-hour virtual receptionist, you don't even need to worry about those after hours options. Sometimes people use us part of the time. So they may have help in the office a few hours a day or a few days a week. Or they may just want someone to answer when they're out of the office. You know, you're an attorney, you want to answer your calls when you're there, but when you're not there, you want to be able to have a virtual receptionist service handle them. So you can manually forward and unforward your phones as you see fit. Your phone company will give you a code to forward your phones and to unforward, and you just do it as you need. The other thing is some firms use us just for when everyone's in a meeting, or they want to extend their hours because they're there 10 hours a day and we're here 13 hours a day, those types of things. And then we actually even have some really big firms, you know, 100 attorneys in the firm who use us, who have a full-time or multiple full-time receptionists, but they want to use us during lunches, they want to potentially extend their hours, and if their receptionist or one of their receptionists calls in sick, getting a temp in there to handle the calls is not very efficient, isn't the right word, effective, I guess. It doesn't work so well. They can get a temp in there, but they really don't know what they're doing at that point. And if they're all fully programmed for us to be a client already, we can handle it. They just forward to us, and we hit the road running. The next way is for overflow. So this would be kind of maximizing your peace of mind. You don't have to worry about forwarding or unforwarding. You set your phones up to what they kind of call a delayed call forwarding. So the calls might ring in your office, say 2 to 3 rings first, and then forward to us. So if you're there in the office and you feel so inclined, great, pick up the phone. If you're not there, you know that on the 3rd or 4th ring, it'll ring to Ruby. Or if you're there and you look at the caller ID and you go, oh, I don't want to talk to that guy, you can just let it go, and you know that we'll get it and we'll handle it for you. And the last is a zero-out option. This is something that often comes up when you have a number of attorneys in let's say 3 or 4 attorneys in a small firm. They have no staff. They each have a direct dial number in the office. But they don't want to make this dead end. So if I dial your direct dial number and you're not there, I get your voicemail, now I'm stuck and I'm not happy. So the ability to have people be able to press 0 and reach someone who might be able to help, who might then try you on your cell or try someone else in the office, or at least give them some idea of your whereabouts, that can be quite handy. So that's kind of the zero-out option. Also works for people who have an automated attendant. They say press 1 for this person, 2 for this person, 3 for this person. If you don't know what you're looking for, you know, press 0 and we'll help you. And we can be the 0 option. So how to choose a virtual receptionist service. So first, get recommendations. So talk to your friends, talk to your people on your listservs, talk to your bar associations, see who people like and why, and go with them. That's my biggest thing, I think. Also, call them to see how they answer their own phones. I hear a lot that well, I'll leave it at you can tell a lot from how the virtual receptionist services answer their own phones, because that's probably how they're going to answer your phones. Do the receptionists sound like they're in your office? So I think this is a really big deal. I think kind of gone are the days where people are happy with an answering service answering and people knowing that, you know, the caller knowing that that person really doesn't have any idea where you are or what you're doing or when you're going to be back or anything. So sounding like they're in the office can really make a big difference. Do they always answer live? Excuse me. I get calls all the time where people say, I've called 3 or 4 virtual receptionist companies and you're the only one who's answered the phone live, which just seems completely bizarre to me because we're live virtual receptionist service. It should be table stakes to answer the phones live. But people don't always do it. So even if you call when you're making your test calls and they answer live, you might ask them if they always answer live. Do they staff enough to make sure that nothing automated will ever answer? Because if you're paying someone for simply answering your phones, in my opinion, they should answer your phones. We talked a little bit about billing earlier. Some companies do charge for talk time. Some companies charge for per call transfer or per message or those types of things. It's not necessarily that any of those fees are exorbitant, but you just don't want to be caught off guard. So it's good to ask if there's any other charges like that involved. Can they transfer calls to you? Most live virtual receptionists can. Sometimes in rare occasions they can't, so it's a good thing to ask. How can you receive your messages? But pretty much almost all email. But some can email and or text. Some only post it to a website and you need to go look. So it's just a good thing to ask about. Some have, like in our case, we email or text. You can also see it on our online system, and we have an iPhone app, so you can see it that way. But good to ask for what's important to you. What's the noise level like? What's the background noise sound like? Our receptionists all sit in cubicles that they're awesome. They're regular cubicles, but the top level of them is glass. So they have high enough walls that they don't hear each other, but they can see each other, so they don't feel like they're in a little box somewhere. And then they wear headsets that are noise canceling. So the background noise is very, very, very minimal, if any. So it's a good thing in your test calls, you can find that out. Pay attention to when you're calling. Can they answer frequently asked questions about your firm? Again, back to the sounding like they're in-house makes a big difference. If someone asks a pretty simple question, they say, you know, where are you located? And they go, I don't know. I'm just with the service. How would I know that? And then most important of all, in my humble opinion anyways, are the receptionists helpful, cheerful, and professional? And then you definitely want to quality control your option. So whether you're using a service or not, frankly, I think it's handy to once a month call your number and see what happens and see what the experience is like for your callers. Some people have no idea that their system makes somebody wait 3 minutes before they get to a live person or something like that. So that is really it.
Excellent. You know, before we wrap up, I'm just going to toss out a couple of questions that we have here. And again, to the folks that are asking questions, thank you so much. And for the ones that we aren't able to get to, again, we'll send them on to Diana, and she'll answer them for you via email. But what is a reasonable number of minutes if you answer full time? Like, for example, what's the length of an average call?
On average, overall, for us anyway, it sits right around a minute. We bill in 30-second increments, and depending, I look at this pretty frequently, and sometimes it's just under a minute, sometimes it's just over a minute, but it's right around a minute. It depends a lot on how people ask us to handle their calls. On the short end of the spectrum is people who say, if someone calls for me, throw it at my cell phone. If I don't answer, my voicemail will pick up. It's fine. The receptionist doesn't spend more than, probably couldn't spend more than 30 seconds on that call. She tried, and she's not trying, trust me. The other end of the spectrum is someone who says, if potential new client calls, try me on my desk phone, try me on my cell phone, then try Bill's cell phone, and if nobody answers, then ask them these 15 intake questions. That call is going to take a while. So the average call, though, is somebody saying, I'm going to see if you're available, I either transfer the call through to you, or I don't find you available, and I take a message and I email it immediately. So the point is that our clients do have some control over how long the calls take because they set up their call handling of how they want, what they want us to do with the call when we get it. Fantastic.
And one final question, Diana. Can you explain the zero out option a little bit more?
Sure. So the idea is that if you have a phone system where it's kind of two different ways to see it. Let's take the automated attendant option. So you call your firm, and maybe you have 3 attorneys in your firm, and you don't have a live person sitting there. So you have an automated attendant, and this could be like through Ring Central, for example. You could get an auto attendant, or you could have a physical piece of hardware that does this for you. Where you call up and it says, thanks for calling ABC firm. For Bill, press 1. For Susie, press 2. For Mike, press 3. But if people don't know who they want, that can be a frustrating experience. So you always want to have or I think you always want to have if you need immediate assistance, press 0. And if you press 0, that call needs to go somewhere. And the 3 of you might not be available. So we can be your zero out option, as they say. So you press 0 and that call would ring to Ruby. And then we can either try to find someone on their cell phone for you, or we can try to figure out which person you really want to be talking to, or we can, handle the call as it should be. The other scenario I explained is, say those same 3 people, they're in a small office with a small phone system, and each person has what's called a direct dial number, often called a DID. So there's a 10-digit number I could dial for Mike, and a 10-digit number I could dial for Susie, and a 10-digit number I could dial for Bill. And if I dial one of their numbers and I get their voicemail, I'm just stuck in their voicemail. But if the outgoing greeting on the voicemail can say, if you need immediate assistance, please press 0, then the caller can press 0 and can come out to Ruby, and Ruby can try to help them. Does that clarify it?
Thank you, Diana. And listen, why don't you go ahead and tell us what your claim to fame is, and let our audience know how they can get in touch with you.
Okay, well, here's how you can get in touch with me. And our claim to fame really is our extremely friendly and professional receptionists. So not just that they sound like they're in your office, but that they really engage with your callers. We get literally unsolicited compliments on a daily basis from people saying, "Oh, people are just raving about how awesome my new receptionist is," and it's incredibly abundant, the comments that we get on this type of thing. And if you Google us and look for comments or reviews, you'll see a lot of those types of comments of just that we're crazy friendly and helpful, and we really want to both engage with our clients and with the callers.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Diana, for a terrific and very informative presentation. And I would like to thank everyone for attending. And please, if you have any questions or if you have any ideas about what you'd like to hear about in the future, please send an email to me, tim@rocketmatter.com, or Larry Port, who's our CEO, larry@rocketmatter.com. Again, thanks again for attending, and thank you, Diana. Goodbye, everyone.
My pleasure. Thank you all.